here with a question that touches the deepest recesses of the psyche, a question that has perhaps haunted you in silence or followed you through the shadows of broken relationships. What is narcissistic abuse, and why does it echo with such devastating resonance in the soul? I want you to listen, not with your surface mind, but with the inner ear that has always heard whispers in the night, because what you call abuse, betrayal, cruelty, or manipulation is never merely about the other. It is a mirror placed before you with precision by the mysterious intelligence of the unconscious, showing you what you most desperately try to hide from yourself. The narcissist, in their cold grandeur, is not an accident in your life. They are an archetype clothed in flesh, a carrier of a pattern, an emissary of the shadow. You may think you have stumbled upon them by chance, or that fate has been cruel, but in truth they come as heralds of something long buried. They are your forgotten wound, walking outside of you, so that you can no longer ignore it within. The pain is real. Make no mistake. The despair, the sense of being emptied, the gaslighting that tears at your sanity, these are not illusions. And yet, they are a stage, they are the dream. The soul chooses to dream in waking life. Just as your night dreams weave images from symbols, so too does the waking world weave figures who embody your psychic truth. The narcissist is one such figure. Their abuse is the language of your unhealed history. Written upon the stage of relationship, I have listened to countless patients tell me of these entanglements. At first, they speak of love, of a charm that felt fated, of someone who seemed to see into them. Then, slowly, the tale turns darker, as if a mask has slipped and they are confronted with an abyss. The same mouth that once praised them now devours them with criticism. The same eyes that adored now strip them bare with contempt. And the victim, bewildered, asks, how could love become this? Why would the soul choose such torment? Because, my friends, the soul does not seek comfort. It seeks wholeness. And wholeness requires that you confront every orphaned part of yourself. Those parts you abandoned long ago. The child who was not seen, the heart that was mocked for being too tender, the voice that was silenced. These live in the unconscious, waiting. They cannot knock upon your door politely. They require a figure, an encounter that will wound you in precisely the way you were first wounded, so that you may at last look within. Narcissistic abuse is not simply cruelty from another. It is a ritual of remembrance. It forces into the light the original fracture of your soul. This is why it cuts so deeply, why it feels like your very existence is being denied. It is not only this person before you, it is the primal echo of those who denied you long before. Perhaps it was a parent who did not recognize your worth, a teacher who dismissed your spirit, or a culture that taught you to be small. The narcissist carries their faces like masks, and in their abuse you feel the weight of centuries of forgetting. Do you understand? You are not being punished. You are being shown. This is the mystery. The narcissist is the mirror, not the truth. And yet, unless you recognize this, you will become ensnared in their game, believing that their cruelty defines your value. You will twist yourself endlessly, trying to win their love, trying to earn the approval that was never truly theirs to give. This is the trap of projection. You have placed upon them the archetype of the divine parent, the eternal lover, the God who will finally fill your emptiness, but they can only reflect. It is not easy to accept. The ego resists, for it wants to blame, to hate, to turn the other into a monster so that it may remain innocent. But the psyche asks more. It asks you to gather back your projections, to see that what draws you into such relationships is not random, but patterned, archetypal, and profoundly instructive. Consider the myth of Narcissus himself. He gazes into the water and falls in love with his reflection, unable to look away, unable to love another. But what is often forgotten is that the story begins with Echo, the nymph who can only repeat the words of others. She has no voice of her own. She is condemned to mirror without substance. Do you see the parallel? In narcissistic abuse, you often become Echo, speaking back only what is allowed, losing the resonance of your own true voice. But in this loss, the myth is enacted again, and you are invited to claim the voice that Echo was denied. Thus, the mirror is not there to destroy you, but to awaken you, to remind you that the forgotten wound is not healed by being loved perfectly by another, but by loving yourself into wholeness, by daring to say, I was wounded, but I will no longer abandon myself. I was unseen, but I will see myself now with clear and tender eyes. I was silenced, but I will speak my truth, even if it trembles. The abuse feels like annihilation, because the unconscious is staging a death, not the death of your soul, but the death of an identity built upon forgetfulness. It is the death of the persona that said, if I am good enough, I will be loved. If I am quiet enough, I will be safe. If I please enough, I will be chosen. That mask is torn away by the narcissist, often brutally, and in the ashes, you are left naked, rough, trembling. Yet this is where the alchemy begins, for in that nakedness, you meet your true self, the archetype of wholeness that was buried beneath the adaptations of childhood. I remember dreams. My patients brought me dreams that came in the midst of these relationships. One dreamed of standing before a shattered mirror, her face splintered into 1,000 pieces, and behind it a great light trying to shine through. Another dreamed of drowning in black water, only to find at the bottom a child holding a lantern. These are not random images. They are the soul's commentary. The mirror shatters, but only so that light can break through. The water swallows, but only so that the child can be remembered. You must not mistake the symbol for the final word. Narcissistic abuse is not the end of your story. It is the descent, the katabasis, the going down into the underworld. Just as Inanna descended into the underworld and was stripped of all her garments, so too are you stripped by this encounter. And like her, you may feel suspended on a hook, lifeless, betrayed, but then, in time, the renewal comes. You are raised not as who you were, but as who you are meant to be. The forgotten wounds are not a weakness. They are your initiation. They mark you as one who can feel deeply, one who can bear the tension of opposites, one who can see into the hearts of others with compassion, because you have been broken open. The narcissist does not know this. They remain trapped in their own mirror, unable to love beyond the reflection, but you, through the fire of their abuse, can awaken to the self. Do not despair if you are still in the darkness. It is part of the process. The unconscious does not heal on our schedule. It unfolds in its own mysterious rhythm. But trust that if you are willing to turn your gaze inward, to ask not only why did they do this to me, but also what in me is being asked to awaken, then the mirror has served its purpose. The narcissist will no longer hold power, for you will see them not as God, not as monster, but as carrier of your forgotten wound, and in that recognition, you reclaim yourself. Let me pause here, for I feel your hearts trembling. It is a difficult teaching. It asks you to take responsibility not for the abuse itself. You are not to blame for another's cruelty, but for the meaning it carries in your psychic story. That is the path of individuation, to weave even suffering into the tapestry of the self, to find the hidden jewel within the stone of rejection. And so, I tell you again, the narcissist is the mirror. Look not at their face, but at what it reveals in you, for there, in the forgotten wound, lies the key to your wholeness. When you begin to recognize that narcissistic abuse is a mirror of your forgotten wounds, something subtle begins to shift inside. At first, it may only be the faintest flicker, like the way dawn announces itself, not with blazing sun, but with a trembling line of light along the horizon. The ego resists this flicker because it has built its identity around the wound itself, around the adaptations required to survive it. The ego says, I must remain pleasing. I must remain useful. I must remain loyal even to cruelty, because in this way I will avoid abandonment. But the soul whispers something different. It says, see how you have lived in repetition, caught in the loop of the forgotten wound. The narcissist is not the first to deny you. They are the most recent phase of an ancient forgetting. Do not underestimate the archetypal power at work here. The wound is not only personal, it is collective. The archetype of the wounded child, the rejected lover, the silenced seer, these are timeless patterns that appear in myth and dream across cultures. To encounter a narcissist is to step into the living myth of your own life, to feel these archetypes stirring in your bones. That is why it feels so fated, so uncanny, as if you have known them forever. They are the mask worn by your own shadow. Let us speak of shadow, for it is essential here. The shadow is not only the dark impulses you hide, it is also the light you refuse to own, the vitality, creativity, and self-worth you exiled because it was unsafe to express. When you were young, if you learned that being too alive brought punishment, you cast your radiance into shadow. If you learned that being too needy brought rejection, you cast your longing into shadow. And now, the narcissist arrives, and by their denial, They force you to feel again what you once disowned. They awaken the shadow by enacting externally what has always existed internally. I recall a woman who came to me after years with a narcissistic partner. She said she felt like a ghost, that she had given up her voice to avoid his rage, her joy to avoid his jealousy, her dreams to avoid his contempt. As she spoke, I saw not only her suffering, but her shadow shimmering behind her, a great reservoir of vitality waiting. And slowly, through analysis, she realized that what hurt most was not his insults, but the fact that she believed them. His voice was the voice of her forgotten father, who had dismissed her as foolish, and she had never stopped hearing it. The partner was merely the vessel for the archetypal wound. Once she saw this, she began to reclaim her shadow, to gather her exiled joy and dreams back to herself. The narcissist lost his power because she no longer sought herself in his mirror. This is the alchemy of the psyche. The narcissist brings the lead, heavy and poisonous, the dull repetition of old pain. But within that lead lies the possibility of gold. Alchemy has always been about transformation through suffering, the transmutation of the base into the divine. So too does your encounter with narcissistic abuse hold within it the possibility of individuation, of becoming whole. The crucible is painful, it burns, it consumes, but out of this fire, the true self is born. Do not imagine that healing means forgetting or erasing what happened. No, the wound becomes the scar, and the scar is sacred. It is the mark of descent and return. Think of Christ after the resurrection, showing his wounds as proof of transformation. Think of the shaman, who in every culture is marked by an illness, a break, an initiation wound that grants them the power to heal others. So too are you invited to bear your scars as testimony. The narcissist wounded you, yes, but in surviving and integrating, you become more than you were. There is a dream I once heard from a man who endured the contempt of a narcissistic father. He dreamed of a tree growing out of a battlefield, its bark scarred by fire, yet from its branches hung golden fruit. He awoke weeping, not in despair, but in awe. The psyche had shown him the scarred tree is not dead. It is the very place where gold is born, and this is the truth for you as well. But how do we move from the mirror to the self first? By withdrawing projection. You must dare to take back what you placed upon the narcissist, the longing for the perfect parent, the desire for unconditional recognition, the fantasy of rescue. All of these you unconsciously handed to them, and in return, they held you captive. To reclaim these projections is not easy, for it means grieving the fact that the perfect parent does not exist, grieving the childhood that was not as it should have been, grieving the loss of illusions. Yet in this grief lies liberation. Second, by descending willingly into the wound. The temptation is always to escape, to numb, to distract, to find another figure who will soothe, but the psyche will not be cheated. It demands that you look into the mirror fully, to see the abandoned child within, to hold them with the love you once sought outside. This is not sentimental love, but fierce, uncompromising presence. To sit with your own pain without fleeing is an act of profound courage. Third, by opening to the archetypal dimension of your suffering. Recognize that you are not alone. The myths of Persephone, of Echo, of Psyche, of Inanna, all tell the same story. Descent, stripping, betrayal, rebirth. You are walking a well-trodden path of the soul. In knowing this, you draw strength, for the archetypes are not only wounds but guides. They assure you that transformation is possible, that the underworld leads to resurrection, and finally, by turning toward the self. The self is the inner wholeness that holds both shadow and light, both wound and healing. It is the axis around which your psyche turns. The narcissist shattered your false center, the fragile ego built upon pleasing others. Now you are invited to root yourself in the deeper center, the self that does not depend upon another's gaze. This is the true liberation, to know your worth, not as reflected in the narcissist's mirror, but as grounded in your own being. I want you to imagine for a moment that you are standing before a mirror. The narcissist is there, and in their eyes you see contempt, denial, rejection. Feel the pain of it, the sharpness in your chest. And now, step closer, look deeper into the mirror, behind their eyes. What do you see? The child you once were, reaching out for love and not finding it? Stay with that image. Can you extend your hand to that child? Can you say to them what you always needed to hear? This is the work. To become the parent to yourself that you never had. To give yourself what the narcissist refused. The outer mirror then dissolves, for it has done its work. You no longer need it, for you carry the inner mirror now, clear and unbroken. And in that mirror, if you see not the narcissist's face, but your own self, luminous and whole, this, my friends, is not a fantasy. It is the living reality of individuation. It is what awaits you if you dare to engage the wound consciously, if you dare to see abuse not only as cruelty but as initiation. The journey is long and often lonely, but you are not without companions. Your dreams will guide you, the archetypes will whisper to you, and your scars will remind you that you are strong enough to carry the truth. Do not fear the mirror. Fear only the refusal to look into it. For when you look and when you gather back what was forgotten, you step into the fullness of your being. And so I say to you, the narcissist was never the answer. But they were the question, they were the mirror, and now the mirror is turned inward. And the answer begins to emerge from within you. The psyche often speaks most clearly in images, and when one has been immersed in the cycle of narcissistic abuse, the dreams that arise can feel like prophecies or like rituals being performed in secret chambers of the soul. Pay attention to them. The unconscious does not waste symbols. If you have endured the gaze of the narcissist, the dreams will bring you mirrors, broken glass, silent children, endless corridors, or figures wearing masks. Each of these is a messenger, each a clue to the work being asked of you. I once heard from a man who dreamed repeatedly of standing in a grand cathedral whose windows were shattered. He felt ashamed, as if God himself had rejected him for being unworthy. Yet in one dream, he knelt among the broken glass and noticed that each shard refracted light differently, forming rainbows across the stone floor. This dream taught him more than any analysis I could have given in words. It revealed that his shame was not the final truth. The shattered window was not an end, but a prism. The narcissist had broken his sense of wholeness, but in that breaking, new colors emerged. This is how the unconscious works. It takes what the ego calls destruction and shows it as transformation. You may think you are being annihilated, but the psyche is showing you that you are being reconfigured. Narcissistic abuse feels like being devoured, as if your very identity is consumed, but the image of devouring is ancient. It is the myth of the great mother who swallows only to birth anew. Think of Jonah in the belly of the whale, or the countless heroes who descend into the stomach of a beast. The narcissist plays this archetypal role, swallowing your borrowed identity so that you may emerge from the depths bearing your true one. But the descent is terrifying. There is always a moment when the dream feels endless, when the victim feels that they will never re-emerge, when the underworld seems absolute. This is where many lose faith, believing they are condemned. Yet the archetype insists otherwise. Persephone was not lost forever in Hades. She emerged, changed, bearing the wisdom of death within her. Christ did not remain in the tomb. He rose, carrying scars that gleamed with new power. The descent is never the last word. You will know you are approaching the turning point when your dreams begin to shift. Where once they showed only helplessness, they begin to show you symbols of resilience. A locked door now has a key in the frame. A dark corridor reveals a candle at its end. A child who once hid in terror begins to speak. These small changes signal that the unconscious is preparing you for re-emergence. They are not accidents. They are the psyche's assurance that you are not abandoned. Yet, even as you move toward healing, the archetypal figure of the narcissist may haunt you. They may appear in your dreams as a tyrant king, as a mirror that refuses to show your reflection, as a voice that mocks. Do not recoil. To fight the shadow is to feed it. Instead, confront them with the knowledge that they are not ultimate. Say to them in the dream, you are my forgotten wound, but you are not my essence. Watch what happens then. Often the tyrant shrinks. The mocking voice falters. The mirror cracks to reveal something behind it. This is the moment when the projection dissolves. Archetypally, the narcissist embodies the devouring father or the seductive trickster, figures who demand worship while denying reciprocity. In mythology, these figures always meet their counterpart, the hero who refuses to be consumed, the maiden who awakens to her own sovereignty. And so it must be in your story. To remain forever enthralled to the narcissist is to remain frozen in the archetype of echo, voiceless and dependent. But the unconscious does not want you frozen. It wants you to become Psyche, who, after trials imposed by a jealous goddess, claims her divine union. It wants you to become Orpheus, who learns that even dissent can yield song. Let me speak plainly, the narcissist does not change. You must not wait for their awakening, for their compassion, for their apology. That is the trap of the wound. You wait for the parent who never came, the lover who never saw you, but the truth is stark. They cannot give what they themselves do not possess. They are trapped in their own mirror. To demand love from them is to demand water from a stone. The work is not to awaken them, but to awaken yourself. Healing does not mean you erase them. They will remain part of your story. An archetypal figure you once met on the stage of life, but their role changes. They are no longer the God who defines you, nor the demon who haunts you. They become the teacher who taught by cruelty, the mirror that showed you your forgotten wound. And once you have learned, you can bow to the symbol without remaining enslaved to the person. Some resist this, saying, why must I find meaning in suffering? Why can I not simply condemn them and move on? You can, of course, but if you do, the wound will remain buried. And the archetype will send you another mirror, another narcissist in different form. The psyche is relentless in its demand for wholeness. It will repeat the pattern until you see. Thus, to find meaning is not to excuse the abuser, but to liberate yourself from the cycle. Consider again the alchemical process. The first stage is nigredo, the blackening, when all is chaos and despair. This is the phase of abuse itself. When you feel dissolved, emptied, annihilated, then comes albedo, the whitening, when the light begins to return, when clarity dawns, and you see the pattern. Then rubedo, the reddening, the stage of integration, when the opposites are united and the gold is formed. You are in the laboratory of your own soul. And narcissistic abuse is the fire that begins the transformation. Do not flee the fire. It is painful, but it is purifying. Let me give you another dream, one that still moves me. A patient who endured years under a narcissistic mother dreamed that she stood in a vast hall lined with mirrors. In each mirror she saw herself distorted, too tall, too thin, monstrous, grotesque. She wept in despair, but then she noticed one mirror in the corner, cracked down the middle. Approaching it, she saw herself not distorted but whole. She touched the crack, and the mirror dissolved into a doorway, beyond which lay a garden radiant with sunlight. When she told me this dream, I said, the crack is the wound. It is the very imperfection that opens the way. Without it, you would still be trapped among false reflections. This is the paradox of healing. What you think is the ruin is the entrance. The narcissist's cruelty breaks you, but through the crack comes the light of the self. It is only by daring to look into that crack, by refusing to turn away from your pain, that you find the door. And when you step through that door, you discover something profound, that your essence was never destroyed. The narcissist could diminish your ego, distort your reflection, silence your voice, but the self remained untouched, hidden like a seed beneath winter soil. The moment you turn inward, you feel it stir. This is why so many who have endured abuse emerge later with extraordinary depth, with compassion, with an ability to see into the suffering of others. They are not weak. Though they may have felt weak, they are initiates, bearers of wisdom earned in fire. So when you ask, why did this happen to me? I answer, because your soul sought wholeness, because the forgotten wound could not remain forgotten forever, because only through this descent could you discover the fullness of yourself. This is not comfort for the ego, which wishes for ease, but it is truth for the soul, which desires depth. The mirror has been cruel, but it has served, and now, as you turn from it, you will see that your reflection was never theirs to define. You carry within you an image more ancient, more luminous, the imago Dei, the divine image. This is the true mirror, the one that cannot be shattered. You have walked with me through the descent, through the blackened corridors of betrayal, through the mirror of forgotten wounds. Now we must speak of what comes after, of the moment when the soul, having touched its deepest fracture, turns toward the dawn of integration. Healing does not mean a return to who you were before the narcissist. It means becoming someone you could never have been without the descent. It means carrying both wound and wisdom, shadow and light, in a new unity. When the mirror shatters, the temptation is to despair at the fragments, but the psyche invites you to gather those fragments, to set them into a mosaic that reveals a larger image. Each piece of pain, each shard of memory, each scar of rejection becomes part of the pattern. You do not heal by erasing, you heal by weaving. The self is the weaver, drawing threads of darkness and threads of light into a single fabric. The narcissist remains part of your tapestry, but they no longer dominate its design. They are a thread, dark and sharp, but among many others. You may look back and say, yes, they wounded me. But you can also say, in wounding me, they forced me to remember what I had lost. And now I live not only with scars, but with the depth of vision that no untouched life could offer. Dreams in this stage often shift dramatically. No longer are they filled with endless corridors and mocking voices. Instead, one sees images of rebirth, children being born, seeds sprouting, rivers breaking through dry land. These are the psyche's assurance that integration has begun. One dream told to me showed a butterfly breaking from its cocoon, its wings wet and trembling, but radiant with color. The dreamer wept, for she felt in her very body that this was her. She had been bound, silenced, crushed, but now, through suffering, she had grown wings. This is individuation, the becoming of who you are meant to be, not the mask, not the persona, not the false self built to survive. The narcissist, cruel as they may seem, played the role of midwife to this birth. Their denial stripped away illusion, their contempt burned the mask, and what remained was raw, but true. It is important here to distinguish between forgiveness and integration. Forgiveness is often misunderstood as excusing, as minimizing what happened. Integration is different. It does not require you to pretend the abuse was less severe, nor to reconcile with the abuser. It requires only that you no longer carry them as God or demon, but as symbol. You recognize them as the mirror You bow to the lesson, and you step forward free. I tell you, do not rush this stage. Integration is not a sudden epiphany, but a slow ripening, just as fruit does not appear overnight, but swells gradually in the sun, so too does your soul ripen into wholeness. Trust the pace of your psyche. If you feel weary, rest. If you feel rage, allow it to speak. If you feel grief, weep fully. These are not signs of failure, but of process. The unconscious is meticulous, and it will not leave anything unresolved. You may notice, as you heal, that your relationships change. What once drew you glamour, intensity, the promise of being saved, no longer enchants. Instead, you begin to crave authenticity, quiet presence, souls who can hold both your light and your shadow. This is a sign that projection has been withdrawn. You no longer cast the archetype of the divine parent onto another, demanding that they fill your void. Instead, you carry your own parent within, your own lover, your own witness. This is the secret liberation, to know that everything you sought outside was always waiting within. And when you meet another now, it is not to complete you, but to accompany you. The narcissist thrives on dependency, but the healed soul thrives on reciprocity. You give not from desperation, but from fullness. You receive not as a beggar, but as an equal. This is love that is no longer shadowed by forgotten wounds. But let me not make it sound too easy. Even in healing, there are echoes. You may still hear their voice sometimes, whispering criticism in your mind. You may still feel the reflex to please, to shrink, to doubt, though not banich. The echoes are natural. They are remnants of the old pattern, and with awareness, they fade. Each time you answer the echo with your own voice, each time you say, no, I am worthy, I am whole, the shadow loses its grip. There is a final archetypal truth I must give you. Every wound, once integrated, becomes a source of healing for others. What you endured was not only for yourself. You carry now a medicine that can be offered to the collective. Perhaps you will speak to others who are still trapped in the mirror. Perhaps you will create art that transfigures your pain into beauty. Perhaps you will simply live in a way that radiates depth, showing those around you that it is possible to descend and rise again. This is the role of the wounded healer, the archetype that has followed humanity across all time. In dreams, this archetype often appears as a figure marked by scars, but holding a staff of light, or as a physician who heals, not by removing wounds, but by touching them with compassion. This is you. You may not yet feel ready, but the moment will come when someone speaks of their suffering, and you will know in your bones how to listen, not with pity, but with recognition. You will see them not as broken, but as one who has begun their descent, and your presence will be their assurance that they too can rise. This, then, is the ultimate truth about narcissistic abuse. It is not the end of your story, but the mirror of your forgotten wounds. And those wounds, when faced, become the very source of your wholeness. You are not cursed for having endured it. You are initiated. You have been marked by descent so that you may know the fullness of ascent. I speak to you now not only as an analyst, but as a fellow traveler of the unconscious. I know the terror of the abyss, the cold of rejection, the madness of gaslighting, but I also know the gold that lies hidden within. Trust that your soul is wiser than your ego imagines. Trust that nothing is wasted, not even the cruelty of the narcissist. All of it can be woven into the tapestry of the self, and when you stand at last before the mirror, not the false mirror of the narcissist, but the true mirror of your own inner image, you will see something extraordinary. You will see that you were never broken, only hidden. You will see that the forgotten child is now embraced. You will see that what you thought was death was in fact rebirth. Carry this truth with you. The narcissist did not define you. They revealed you, and now you walk not as echo repeating another's voice, but as one who has found your own. The mirror has served its purpose. The wound has been remembered. The self has awakened. And so I leave you with this. Do not fear the wound. Fear only the forgetting. For it is in remembrance that you are made whole. And it is in wholeness that you discover the mystery of being truly alive.